Chapter 1744. The two of them were playing chess happily and leisurely. When a person was immersed in something, time always passed very quickly. During this period, Chu Luiyue had been rushing between Phoenix Mountain and the god-slaying tomb. She was very busy. The two of them had almost no time alone. It was even difficult for them to have a proper conversation. Now, they finally had time to sit down and rest. They could even play chess and talk together. Most importantly, no one would disturb them, so they didn't have to worry about life and death. Chu Luiyue felt very relaxed. The Holy Sun was very satisfied. I won. Chu Luiyue's eyes were bright, full of unconcealable joy. Rong Xiu also smiled with a sense of laziness. You seem to have improved a lot. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Of course. Rong Xiu smiled and shook his head. I mean, after you came out of the god-slaying tomb, you seem to have improved a lot. When she played chess, her moves were obviously different from before. It seemed that she could see more clearly. Chu Luiyue was stunned, and then she began to think seriously. It seems a little. At first, she didn't feel it, but when Rong Xiu said this, she realized that when she played chess with Rong Xiu this time, her thoughts seemed to be clearer and her reactions were faster. It was as if, somehow, she naturally knew where to go. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue was stunned. Was it because she had seen tens of thousands of music scores in the god-slaying tomb? After overcoming one music score after another with great difficulty, she felt much more relaxed when she saw these now. Rong Xiu looked at her with a smile. I lost. Princess, do you have any reward? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and glanced at him. Your Highness, can you be more shameless? It's fine that you won, but now that you've lost, you want a reward? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and readily agreed. Even if there's no reward, there should be some consolation, right? Chu Luiyue. As she spoke, she gently waved her hand, and the chess pieces on the chessboard all scattered. One more round. She desperately wanted to know if her guess was right. However, Rong Xiu was not having it. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. I'm too tired to eat anymore. Chu Luiyue was speechless. It had only been a while, and he was already saying that he was tired and didn't want to play anymore. Although this method of chess was indeed quite taxing on one's origin power and spirit, it wasn't believable coming from Rong Xiu's mouth. He was obviously trying to comfort her. After a while, she smiled as well. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few years, your Highness' stamina would actually decline so much. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luiyue felt the surrounding temperature suddenly drop. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows, then suddenly stood up and walked over. As he took a step forward, the chessboard between the two of them dispersed like water ripples, transforming into several streams of light that flew away. The distance between the two of them was extremely close to begin with. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was sitting while he was standing, but there was a strong sense of oppression. Then he bent down. His handsome and devilish face suddenly came close, and his warm breath fell on her face. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly tightened. At this moment, she keenly sensed a trace of danger. Rong Xiu was very close to her. When they spoke, their breaths were intertwined. He seemed to be laughing, and his voice was exceptionally deep and provocative. He reached out his hand and pinched her chin, not allowing her to escape. His slightly rough fingers gently caressed her dark red and tender lips. His breathing suddenly became heavier. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. He leaned closer, slightly tilted his head, and pressed his lips against her white and somewhat transparent ear. In a low voice, he said word by word, "You haven't tried, how would you know?" Half of Chu Luiyue's body went numb. Rong Xiu looked with satisfaction at her white and delicate ear, which was quickly dyed with a layer of crimson. This crimson-red color quickly spread to her slender neck. Her hair was like a waterfall, and her fine black hair hung down, making her skin look even more delicate. With this touch of red, it was more like a fire was lit in Rong Xiu's heart. He suddenly bit her delicate earlobe. Chu Luiyue was startled, subconsciously shrinking her neck, and a soft sound came out of her throat. Sweet and soft. So sweet that his whole body heated up. His syllables were vague, but every word was beating on her heart. Since you won't give it to me, I will take it myself. Outside the boundary of 7 Lotus Peaks, security was tight. One of the guards couldn't help but look back. Silence, desolation. The cave halfway up the mountain, except for the first day when Rong Xiu burned it with fire, there was no other movement. It's been a few days, why haven't they shown any reaction? The patriarch had already specifically asked about it twice. The other guard also looked back and frowned. That's right. This is not an ordinary place, it's 7 Lotus Peaks. Even the clansmen who were locked up here could only last 3 days at most, let alone 2 humans. Ever since Rong Xiu and Shangguan Yu were locked up here, they had been tense and didn't dare to slack off, waiting for them to come out at any time to bow their heads and admit defeat. According to past experience, it wouldn't take too long. But who would have thought that after a few days, everything was still the same as before? Can't be. Could it be that the 2 of them have already fainted inside, so impossible? If that's the case, they would have been directly sent out, and not like now. There's no sound at all. Both of them fell silent. For now, it seemed that they could only continue to wait. It seems like half of the Temple of Void have been eliminated. One of the guards changed the topic. The other didn't think much of it. Isn't that normal? There are only a few who are really powerful. For those people, the 1000 Summit is a good opportunity for a meteoric rise, but for the majority of the people, it's just a side run. The competition in the clan was fierce, and this was normal. That's true. The other guard responded and didn't say anything else. Outside Divine Dragon Island, on a barren mountain peak, Dumpling looked at Nan Suhuai, blinking her eyes, unable to hide her excitement. Grandpa Dean, will this method really work? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1745. Nan Suhuai shook his head. Actually, I can't guarantee that it will succeed. Hearing this, Dumpling's grape-like big eyes flashed with disappointment. However, she quickly became spirited again. She clenched her small fists and said seriously, "Even if there's a glimmer of hope, I still want to try." Nan Suhuai stroked her hair. Okay. After saying that, Nan Suhuai turned to look at Shangguan Jing. "Senior Shangguan, please protect me." Shangguan Jing nodded. In fact, he was also very curious about what method Nan Suhuai had to break through the heavy defenses of Divine Dragon Island and contact you and the others. Shangguan Jing raised his hand, and a palm-sized green iron ring appeared in his palm. This iron ring looked quite old, and there were spots of rust on its edges. One could vaguely see some kind of complicated pattern engraved on it, and it emitted an ancient aura. This is a divine artifact that I made in my early years. It can conceal one's aura and form an extremely powerful barrier. It should be the most suitable for protecting you. As he spoke, he held his breath and concentrated, injecting a strand of force into it. Buzz. Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the cyan iron hoop. Small fragments of light shone out from the patterns. Shangguan Jing threw his wrist. The green iron ring instantly flew above everyone's heads. It spun rapidly, and a clear and bright white light sprinkled down like a thin veil, forming a hemispherical barrier that enveloped everyone. Nan Suhuai calmed down a little. He crossed his legs and raised his arms. Several streams of light flew out from his fingertips and quickly intersected in midair, forming a circular Xian formation. The surrounding space seemed to be affected by this power, and it produced subtle fluctuations. Vaguely, he could even see the fine black spatial rifts in them. The others were all taken aback. This was not a Xian formation, but a teleportation formation. Although these 2 formations were usually used by Xian masters, there was a huge difference between them. Building a teleportation formation was several times more difficult than drawing a Xian formation. Not only did Xian masters need to have sufficient understanding of Xian formations, they also needed to have sufficient control over space. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause extremely serious consequences. Of course, the people present were not surprised by Nan Suhuai's construction of the teleportation formation. After all, he was a well-deserved top expert. It was not a difficult task for him. Most importantly, why did he choose to take action at this time? After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the teleportation array was finally completed. Dumpling stared blankly at the flickering teleportation array. Grandpa Dean, didn't you say that you wanted to find a way to contact Yu and the others? Then this teleportation array is... Nan Su Huai patiently explained. The purpose of creating the teleportation formation is naturally to enter the Divine Dragon Island. Shengguan Jing and Chu Ning both looked at Nan Su Huai in unison. They couldn't hide the shock on their faces. So this was his plan. Even Tuanzi felt that something was wrong. She tilted her head and asked curiously, But didn't that person say that he wouldn't let us in? Moreover, they are heavily guarded. From what I can see, there are 2 layers of barriers. This teleportation circle? How do I get in? She had thought that Grandpa Dean meant to wait outside for Yu and the rest to come out. Nan Su Huai chuckled. Won't we be able to contact them if we use this teleportation array? We might even be able to see them directly. That was even better. Chu Ning couldn't help but frown. She asked with a worried expression, Dean Nan, can your teleportation array really avoid the Great Phoenix Dragon's search and directly find you and the rest? Nan Su Huai laughed. Of course. He heaved a long sigh and looked at the teleportation array solemnly. This teleportation array was created by the first dean of our Lingxiao College. It said that if one can fully comprehend it, even the barriers of the world of divine ruins won't be able to stop them from coming and going. However, only the dean is qualified to learn this teleportation array. I've studied it for several years, but I've only reached the initial level. Although I can't enter and exit the world of divine ruins as I wish, it shouldn't be a problem for me to sneak into the Divine Dragon Island. Shengguan Jing and Chu Ning exchanged a look and saw the shock in each other's eyes. It could ignore the barriers and move freely inside and outside the world of divine ruins. This teleportation array was really powerful. Shengguan Jing sighed. It said that the first dean of your college was a peerless powerhouse and had the ability to reach the heavens. Now it seems that he really lives up to his reputation. Nan Su Huai smiled. There was no doubt about that. There had always been many rumors about that person in the world of divine ruins. However, the true ability of that person back then was more than several times stronger than those rumors. However, this was basically only known to the past deans of the college. There's just one thing. Nan Su Huai's expression suddenly became serious. Once this teleportation array is activated, I need to guard it throughout the entire process, just in case. In other words, I have to stay here. In addition, I'll have to trouble Senior Shangguan to help protect me. Therefore, only Chu Ning and Dumpling could go in. They were all stunned. Chu Ning thought for a moment and shook her head. I'm now a Stage 1 warrior. If I follow them in, not only will I not be of any help, I might even drag them down. It's better for me to stay here. He was very clear about his own strength. Although he had the indestructible divine body that ordinary people couldn't have, his resistance to attacks was top-notch, and he could also use the divine domain. But this time, they wanted to secretly enter Divine Dragon Island to find someone. He wouldn't be of any help, so it was better for him to stay. Tuanzi was lighter and more agile when she was alone. Moreover, she had a contract with you, so she was the best person to find someone. Nan Su Huai nodded. In fact, he also thought so in his heart. However, in this case, only Dumpling could go in alone. He was more or less worried. Dumpling, can you do it by yourself? Dumpling was also a little surprised. She originally thought that everyone could go in together. Hearing Nan Su Huai's question, she opened her eyes wide and looked back and forth between them a few times. Finally, she nodded vigorously. Yes. Nan Su Huai looked relieved, but he couldn't help but smile bitterly. If Patriarchy Zhao and the others know about this, I don't know how to explain it. Dumpling's identity was too special. If she was just an ordinary divine beast, it would be fine. However, she was the Great Phoenix Dragon's enemy, the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. More importantly, she was the young master. If this was discovered by the Great Phoenix Dragon and the others, it would definitely set off a perilous situation. Dumpling knew what he was worried about. She pursed her lips and said seriously, "Grandpa Dean, don't worry. After I go in, I will be very careful. Once I find IU, I will bring them back." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1746. After saying that, Tuanzi lightly jumped onto the teleportation array. Nan Suhui nodded lightly. "Be careful." With that, force surged in his palm. In an instant, light shone brightly. The transportation formation slowly rotated. Soon, Dumpling's figure was swallowed by the light and completely disappeared. On the square in front of the Great Void Temple, everyone was still waiting. A few days had passed, and most of the people who entered had been eliminated. Only the last 5 people were left in the group. Mao Yang's expression was calm, and he did not say a word. The surrounding atmosphere was inexplicably stagnant. It was silent. Everyone was silent, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Actually, there was a reason why they were like this. None of the people who had been eliminated had obtained any inheritance in the Great Void Temple. This was something that had never happened in the previous Thousand Peaks Summit. Although most of the people who had been eliminated early on had obtained nothing, there were occasionally some lucky people who had encountered their own opportunities. Even if the inheritance they obtained was not the best, it was still a good thing. But this time, the people who had gone before had all returned empty-handed. Therefore, although Mao Yang's expression did not change, and he was still as calm as ever, everyone could not help but feel nervous. Given the current situation, unless the 5 people at the back all obtained good inheritances, or at least one of them obtained a top inheritance, the uneasiness in everyone's hearts could be appeased. Some people secretly glanced at Mao Yang from time to time, wanting to see something from his expression. Unfortunately, Mao Yang's thoughts were always hidden deep, and no one could guess them. Suddenly, Mao Yang's brows twitched, and he glanced back. This extremely simple action immediately made many people around him nervous. "Patriarch, what's wrong?" An elder bowed and asked. Mao Yang stared at the void in the distance for a long time before saying, "During this period, has there been anything strange outside the Divine Dragon Island?" Just now, he vaguely sensed that there seemed to be a slight fluctuation in the boundary outside. However, this fluctuation disappeared in an instant, as if it was just his imagination. The elder was stunned, and then hurriedly said, "Patriarch, everything is normal. Ever since you ordered us to strictly guard the boundary, the clan has sent more people to guard it, and we won't let anyone in as they wish." Mao Yang nodded. Even if he didn't say anything, the elders in the clan would be especially vigilant in this regard. However, what was that wave of energy just now? Could it be that he was mistaken? Mao Yang thought for a moment and stood up. "I'll go take a look myself." Everyone around was shocked. The 1000 Summit is still ongoing. How could the Patriarch leave at this time? What they didn't know was that Mao Yang's patience was actually almost worn down. He had been the Patriarch for many years and had experienced the Millennium Summit many times. He was very experienced in this aspect. He knew that even if the remaining 5 people obtained the inheritance, it would be very difficult for them to be compared with the little girl from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was just that he could not say these words in public. Mao Yang lifted his leg and walked over. The people behind him looked at each other. He was the Patriarch, so who would dare to stop him? Moreover, he was going to check the defenses of the Divine Dragon Island. There was absolutely no reason to dissuade him from doing so. A few elders exchanged glances, and one of them followed. Anyway, it was just a look, so it wouldn't waste much time and energy. Bang! The door of the Great Void Temple suddenly opened again. A figure flew out from within. Unlike those who were thrown out in a sorry state, this young man was very calm when he came out. He took a step, his body spun in midair, and landed steadily on the ground. There were a few bloodstains on his body, but it didn't affect the powerful aura surging around him. More importantly, the great phoenix dragon totem between his eyebrows was shining faintly. This was the sign of obtaining the inheritance. And from that reaction, it seemed to be a very good inheritance. The square, which had been silent for a long time, finally became lively again because of the appearance of this young man. Mao Yang smiled when he saw this scene. After hesitating for a moment, he dismissed the idea of personally checking the barrier. This was the first junior to obtain the inheritance. As the patriarch, how could he not be here? Go take a look again. You must guard every corner of the Divine Dragon Island well, he said in a low voice. The elders beside him hurriedly responded. Yes. Mao Yang nodded and walked towards the young man. At this moment, a satisfied and appreciative smile appeared on his face. Well done. The young man also couldn't hide his excitement. The inheritance he obtained this time was indeed of a high level. Even if it wasn't the best, it was still very good. Thank you, Patriarch. Mao Yang nodded and asked a few more questions. The young man respectfully answered them one by one. Mao Yang returned to his seat and began to wait for the remaining 4 to come out. And that small ripple was quickly put aside by him. 7 Lotus Peak. Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei were still playing chess. Of course, this was already a new round. On the chessboard, the two of them fought fiercely, and Chu Luiwei had a slight advantage. She stared at the chessboard and didn't move for a long time. Rong Xiu wasn't in a hurry and just waited quietly. Finally, Chu Luiwei put down her hand and shook her head. I'm not playing anymore. After repeated investigations, she could now confirm that her strength in this aspect was indeed much stronger than before. In the past, when she played chess with Rong Xiu, she always lost more than she won. Moreover, she had to expend a lot of mental strength every time. But now, this feeling had lessened a lot. After reading the tens of thousands of fake zither scores, her talent as a mystic master had increased by an astonishing amount. One had to know that talent was something that came with being born and was basically unchangeable. Martial artists might be able to use some special methods to increase the grade of their yuan meridians, but mystic masters and celestial physician really couldn't do anything. But now, she was certain that her talent in this aspect had changed. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his eyes seemed to contain a hint of flirtatiousness. He said lazily and straightforwardly, Comfort. Digression. The list of New Year's Day activities and the list of events from last month will be released tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 1747. Chu Luiwei glared at him angrily. Her starry eyes were bright and her face was flushed red, which made her eyes look even brighter. This look was not threatening at all. Instead, it was like a gentle scratch on Rong Xiu's heart. Soft, sweet, and a little ticklish. He wanted to pull her over, just like last time. Thinking of this, Rong Xiu restrained himself and calmed down. He couldn't think about it anymore. In front of her, he never had any willpower to speak of. Previously, when he pressed her down and wanted to comfort her, he really bullied her. After that, you didn't even let him touch her hand. He coaxed her for a few days. Rong Xiu couldn't help but chuckle and rub his eyebrows. Forget it. Anyway, the one who suffers in the end is I. Chu Luiwei's face was slightly hot, and the corners of her lips curled up. You reap what you sow, and you ask for trouble. It's referring to people like your highness. Rong Xiu raised a finger and shook it, looking at her with a smile. I don't feel bitter. Is extremely sweet. Chu Luiwei. That's why thick-skinned and black-bellied men are always particularly difficult to deal with. Chu Luiwei simply gave up fighting with him. In this aspect, she almost never won. She stood up, thought for a while, and then added, Then your highness can continue to suffer like this. In short, there's no comfort or reward. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. There's no hurry. After the wedding, I will naturally ask for it all. Chu Luiwei snorted and simply changed the topic. Then we have to get out of here first. She looked around her. Rong Xiu's pearl illuminated the area around the two of them, but it was empty. No matter whether it was in front or behind, it was pitch black. Only the crazy and mournful marks on the surrounding mountain walls, as well as the ancient bloodstains that appeared occasionally, were particularly eye-catching. We've been here for quite a long time, Chu Luiwei said and looked at Rong Xiu again. When do you think it's a good time to leave? She directly asked about the time, not whether they could leave. Because after entering, she found that Rong Xiu's reaction was very calm. She was inexplicably certain that Rong Xiu definitely knew how to break out of this illusion. Rong Xiu walked over. If there was anyone in this world who understood him and could guess his thoughts, it was only her. Even if he didn't say anything, just a look was more than 1,000 words. The thousand summit is not over. Chu Luiwei was stunned. Rong Xiu was indeed waiting. But why did he wait until the end? Just as she was about to continue asking, a familiar wave of energy suddenly came over. She suddenly turned her head. In that deep darkness, a bright light suddenly flashed. This light quickly dispersed into several rays and intertwined with each other. In a moment, a teleportation array was formed. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the teleportation array. Then, a familiar little figure appeared in the glittering light. Dumpling! Chu Luiyue widened her eyes in shock. Who else could it be other than Tuanzi? She was wearing a red and golden lotus leaf dress and had 2 round buns on her head. "Ah, you!" Hearing Chu Liuyue's voice, Dumpling, who was still a little dizzy, immediately looked over. When she saw the face that she missed, Dumpling's cheeks flushed red with excitement. She ran over excitedly. "Ah, you! I found you!" As she spoke, she threw herself into Chu Liuyue's arms. Chu Luiyue bent down and caught her. The two of them hugged each other tightly. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Dumpling hugged Chu Liuyue's neck tightly. "Ah, you! I've been looking for you so hard." Ever since she returned to Ayu's side, they had never been separated for so long. Hearing her slightly choked voice, Chu Liuyue's heart ached. She patted her back gently. All right. I'm fine now, aren't I? By the way, weren't you stopped outside? How did you get in?" Chu Liuyue let go of Dumpling and looked her up and down carefully. "Have you been discovered? Are you hurt?" Dumpling shook her head. "Oh no. I was very careful when I came in. They didn't discover me. And I'm not hurt. With Grandpa Dean around, how could I be hurt?" Chu Luiyue instantly understood. "Did Master specially send you here?" When she saw the teleportation array, she recognized that it was her master's work. However, she didn't expect that it was Dumpling who came. "Where's Taizu and Daddy? Are they outside?" Dumpling nodded. "They're all with Grandpa Dean." Following that, she briefly recounted what had happened earlier. "So in the end, Grandpa Dean told me to come and find you myself." Originally, Dumpling didn't dare to have too much hope. She was prepared to look for them here. Fortunately, Nansu Huai was very powerful and directly sent her here. After all, Chu Luiyue was his disciple. The master and disciple had a certain level of telepathy between them. To be able to find her directly, one had to have strength and luck. Chu Liuyue's heart was in her mouth. "Dumpling, you really weren't discovered?" After all, Dumpling was a crimson gold celestial phoenix. The great phoenix dragon should be extremely sensitive to her aura. After all, this was Divine Dragon Island. The slightest carelessness would cause great trouble. Therefore, Chu Liuyue was extremely careful. Those people shouldn't have noticed. Otherwise, they would have rushed over by now. Rong Xiu said. Chu Liuyue thought about it and felt that it made sense. For the time being, there was no movement outside. Dumpling held Chu Liuyue's hand, her eyes bright. "Ayu, let's go now." As long as they left secretly, no one could do anything to them. Chu Liuyue paused, but did not immediately agree. She and Rong Xiu were locked up here by Mao Yang. Mao Yang said that unless they agreed to erase their memories of Divine Dragon Island, he would never let them leave. His attitude was very firm. Even if they left now, the great Void Phoenix Dragon race would not let this matter rest. Moreover, this matter would only get bigger and bigger. During this period of time, she had been thinking about whether she could solve these problems without shedding blood, but she had no answer. Just as her heart was wavering, Rong Xiu said, "We can't leave yet." Chu Liuyue and Dumpling turned to look at him. Tuanzi was at a loss. But she had finally found this place. Couldn't they just leave through the teleportation array? Chu Liuyue was more and more certain of her guess. She asked directly, "What do you plan to do after the 1,000 Summit?" Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. "If we leave quietly, Although we can temporarily escape, there will be endless trouble. The Great Phoenix Dragon Clan is very vengeful. If we don't completely solve the problem, there will only be endless trouble. It's better to let them owe us a favor and take the initiative to let us leave. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1748. Chu Luiwen knew that the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan was not easy to deal with. This could be seen from the Taizu. For that set of bones, they had chased after the Taizu for thousands of years and had refused to give up. If it were not for the incident in the academy, they would still be pestering her. Of course, this hatred did not disappear. Instead, it was transferred to her. When Mao Yao looked at her, his eyes were full of resentment. She saw it clearly. Even the other members of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan were full of hostility towards her. If possible, she did not want to continue being entangled with them like this. It would be best if she could solve the problem once and for all. Owe them a favor? They were now in someone else's territory. It was obviously not very convenient for them to do anything, let alone make the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan owe them a favor. Rong Xiu raised his hand and pointed upwards. They have already sent the opportunity to us. There is no reason for us not to take it. Chu Luiwei suddenly thought of something. You mean, their ancestor who went berserk? Rong Xiu nodded and smiled. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon was a sinner in their clan and had a tragic end, he was an extremely top genius when he was alive. The Great Phoenix Dragon Clan had even tacitly agreed that he would be the next clan leader. Even Mao Yang could not be compared to him. If those messy things had not happened back then, Mao Yang would not have been the clan leader now. Chu Liwei was shocked. You mean, that person is of the same generation as Mao Yang? She had always thought that it should be something that happened a long time ago. Mao Yang has been the clan leader for 800 years. That incident happened 1,000 years ago. Rong Xiu said. 1,000 years was not a short time. More importantly, that Great Phoenix Dragon had once obtained an extremely powerful inheritance. Chu Liwei was slightly taken aback. Inheritance? That's right. All the powerful ancestors of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would be enshrined in the Great Void Temple after they passed away. These skeletons contained their pure bloodline power, as well as many incantations they had learned when they were alive. If you can obtain its recognition and obtain its power, you will be considered to have obtained its inheritance. Those who can be enshrined in the Great Void Temple and leave behind their legacies are obviously very powerful. However, when they were put together, it was inevitable that there would be a difference in strength. It was said that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon had obtained one of the top 3 inheritances. Rong Xiu paused. In the past 10,000 years, only 2 people have obtained the top 3 successions. It was one of them. Chu Liwei subconsciously held his breath. From this, it was not difficult to understand how powerful the inheritance was. For the Great Phoenix Dragon to be able to do this, it was clearly extraordinary. How did such a powerful figure end up? Chu Liwei muttered in a low voice, somewhat puzzled. Rong Xiu smiled. There is often only a step between a genius and a lunatic. So much time has passed, and no one can clearly explain what happened back then. However, the key is that after its death, the inheritance also disappeared. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe spent a lot of manpower and material resources to search for it for a long time, but to no avail. Chu Liwei suddenly understood something, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be that you want to find the inheritance? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. Chu Liu's heart was in turmoil. This thing was extremely important to the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe. If this was used as a plan, those matters would be easily solved. However, this matter was easy to say, but it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This, even the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe has no clue. How can we find it? Rong Xiu's gaze turned slightly and landed on the mountain wall. A long time had passed, but the traces still showed the madness of back then. He gently raised his hand. In his palm, a pearl the size of a longan suddenly appeared. A small figure of a Great Void Phoenix Dragon appeared in it. Chu Luiwei suddenly opened his eyes wide. This is, when I refined the skeleton previously, I left half of the bloodline power. Rong Xiu said with a smile. As expected, Chu Luiwei suddenly understood, and at the same time secretly exclaimed. She didn't even notice when Rong Xiu was doing all this. Mao Yang and the others probably did not know, otherwise they would not have let them leave so easily. To cross the sky and the sea under the other party's nose, only Rong Xiu could do this. Rong Xiu's fingertips moved slightly, and the small ball of light flew to a dark red bloodstain on the mountain wall, and in the blink of an eye, disappeared. The surroundings were silent. A moment later, Chu Luiwei was shocked to see that the color of the bloodstain suddenly turned bright red. Then, the bloodstain began to rapidly condense, and finally, formed a blood bead, suspended in midair. A cluster of golden flames rose from Rong Xiu's palm. The flames quickly pounced and enveloped the blood bead, forming a blood-red and golden bead. Rong Xiu walked to the side. The bead followed him and soon landed in front of another remaining dark red bloodstain. As if guided by the power of the blood bead, the bloodstain quickly turned bright red, and then transformed into a blood bead and merged with it. Chu Luiwei said, "Are you going to merge all the bloodstains here?" "No." Rong Xiu shook his head, "Only that one." Chu Luiwei instantly understood something. "You mean, besides this, there are other great Void Phoenix Dragon's blood here?" Mao Yang. Zichen's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Luiwei was stunned. "There are only 2 great Void Phoenix Dragon's blood here. Some of it is that one, and the rest is Mao Yang's." Zichen also had a part of the great Void Phoenix Dragon's bloodline power in his body, so he was obviously much more sensitive in this regard. Since he said that it was Mao Yang's blood, it must be right. But the point was, why was there only Mao Yang's blood here? Didn't they say that the one who went berserk was imprisoned here for a period of time and was executed? Was Mao Yang also involved in this matter? Chu Luiwei vaguely felt that there seemed to be a shocking secret buried here. And they were only one step away from this secret. Dumpling was in a hurry to take them away, but after hearing what they said, she felt that it made sense and waited obediently by the side. Inside the cave, there was only silence. Only the blood bead in Rong Xiu's hand became more and more bloody as time passed. Following that, there was a powerful pressure that was faintly discernible. Chu Luiwei could not help but be secretly shocked. Just a few remaining bloodstains, when gathered together, were already so shocking. Then, how powerful was that person back then? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1749. Rong Xiu spent about 2 hours collecting all the bloodstains in the cave. Of course, these were only the blood of the one who was imprisoned here. As for the rest, he did not pay any attention to them. A fist-sized blood bead floated quietly in front of the 2 of them. An indescribably powerful pressure gradually emanated from it. It was very shocking. The faint glow of the pearl reflected on it, giving it a strange and beautiful dazzling light. Chu Luiwei asked in a low voice, "What should we do next?" Could it be that the inheritance was left in this blood bead? That seemed unlikely. At this moment, a fluctuation came from Chu Luiwei's dantian. Chu Luiwei was stunned. The fluctuation came from Zichen. A black light flashed in front of him, and a huge black figure appeared in the cave. Zichen rarely took the initiative to come out, so Chu Luiwei was very surprised. However, Zichen stared at the blood bead with a grave expression. "Did you see something?" Chu Luiwei asked. Zichen nodded. "This blood bead hides the aura of the great phoenix dragon's ancestor." Chu Luiwei's pupils shrank. Rong Xiu also narrowed his eyes. Zichen quickly explained. "Of course, this does not mean that this blood bead belongs to that ancestor. It only means that this blood bead should contain the power of that ancestor." Zichen paused for a moment before he said, "If I'm not wrong, this person must have obtained the inheritance of their ancestor." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire cave fell into a dead silence. Chu Luiwei felt that something was wrong when he heard Zichen's first sentence. Now that he heard Zichen's explanation, he was even more shocked. Rong Xiu was silent for a moment, then a playful smile appeared on his face. It said that it obtained an extremely powerful and precious inheritance. I only thought that it was some powerful ancestor. I didn't expect it to be their ancestor. Zichen nodded. It had the power of the great phoenix dragon in its body, so it could not be mistaken. This aura was exactly the same as the pressure from the dragon's roar that they heard when they entered. If that's the case, it'll be even more interesting. The corners of Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly, and there seemed to be waves in his deep phoenix eyes. The great void phoenix dragon has received the inheritance of our ancestor. She is the heir chosen by our ancestor. Her bloodline is the purest. How could she have gone mad? Chu Luiyue subconsciously glanced at Dumpling. That's right. These two ancient divine beast clans were very particular about the power of the bloodline, and they were very protective of their ancestors. Take Dumpling for example. Although her background was ordinary, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's attitude towards her immediately changed greatly after she received the approval of the ancestors. From full of disdain to full of respect. However, it was because the ancestors had personally chosen her and acknowledged her. How could someone with such a powerful bloodline and the inheritance of their ancestors do such a crazy thing as killing her own clan? It seems that there is a hidden story behind what happened back then. It has received the inheritance of our ancestors. How could no one know about such an important matter? Rong Xiu smiled faintly. It's not necessarily that no one knows. It's just that the people who know about this matter have buried this secret forever. A light flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. Mao Yang. It must be him. If that was the case, it was not difficult to explain why there were only 2 bloodstains left in this cave. More importantly, the person who had become the clan leader after the Great Void Phoenix clan was killed was Mao Yang. As the biggest beneficiary of this matter, how could he have nothing to do with it? How could it be clean? The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan, from top to bottom, had probably been completely concealed. But after so many years, how could the people of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan not discover anything fishy at all? This 7 Lotus Mountain, this cave, these bloodstains. Since Zichen could detect these, their clansmen should be able to as well. Rong Xiu seemed to have guessed her thoughts and explained. Naturally, it's because everything here has been tampered with. Do you still remember that before we came in, I set fire to the entrance of the cave and set it on fire? Chu Luiyue nodded. There are some things left behind by Mao Yang. It should be because of this that no one has discovered the secret of this place all these years. This was indeed the most logical explanation. Mao Yang was the clan leader. Naturally, he could do whatever he wanted. He could only let in whoever he wanted. If he did not want to be discovered, who could unravel these secrets? Who would dare to touch the power he had left behind? However, Rong Xiu was different. He had mercilessly attacked the moment he arrived. Coupled with Zichen, this secret was naturally exposed. Mao Yang would never have imagined that he had locked them up here to threaten them. In the end, they had unearthed such an old secret. If this matter was exposed, Mao Yang would no longer be the clan leader. Compared to their ancestors, the clan leader was nothing. The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan would probably go on a crusade against him. At this moment, Zichen suddenly stepped forward. Step back. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other and took a step back. Zichen suddenly spread his wings. Then, Chu Luiyue saw a faint glow on his wings. That was the skeleton and power of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Then, the blood bead slowly drifted towards Zichen. Finally, it split into 2 and melted into his wings. Rumble. The ground beneath their feet suddenly shook violently. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1750. However, the tremor only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, the sound of something shattering came from the surroundings. Chu Luiyue quickly looked up and saw that the space around them was collapsing rapidly. The illusion was about to break. Rong Xiao immediately rushed over and grabbed her waist. Boom! The void shattered completely. The few of them disappeared from where they stood. At the same time, the flickering teleportation formation in the cave also disappeared quietly. Outside Divine Dragon Island, Nansu Huai suddenly sensed something. His eyes were filled with shock. Then, half of the teleportation formation dimmed. When Shangguan Jing and Chu Ning saw this scene, they were both shocked. What's going on? What happened? Shangguan Jing asked anxiously. Nansu Huai did not answer his question immediately. Instead, he gritted his teeth and channeled his force into the teleportation formation. However, the dimmed half did not light up again. His back was drenched in cold sweat. Shangguan Jing and Chu Ning felt uneasy when they saw his expression. Chu Ning asked again, "Dean, what's going on? Why did half of the teleportation formation dim out of the blue?" Nansu Huai closed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Half of the teleportation formation is destroyed." "Half of it?" Chu Ning frowned. His eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. He had never heard of such a thing. However, Shangguan Jing seemed to have thought of something. His face darkened and was filled with deep worry. Nansu Huai explained, "A normal teleportation formation will collapse completely once it's affected by an external force. However, our teleportation formation is different. Half of it means the other end of the teleportation formation has been destroyed." Chu Ning reacted. "Then, doesn't that mean they won't be able to come back?" Nansu Huai shook his head. "Not necessarily. This teleportation formation is different from other teleportation formations. Half of it is destroyed, but the other half is still fine. If they can find a way to repair the other end of the teleportation formation, they can still return safely." His words did not ease Chu Ning's mind. It was easy to say, but how could it be so easy to do? Nansu Huai had said before that other than the dean, no one else was qualified to learn how to repair the teleportation formation. Then how would you and the others recover and return? Nansu Huai knew what Chu Ning was worried about and consoled him. "Chu Ning, you has learned about teleportation arrays before. Although she couldn't use it with her current strength, she still had Rong Xiao by her side. If the two of them worked together, there might be hope." Hearing this, Chu Ning finally calmed down. "Really?" Nansu Huai smiled helplessly. "You is my only disciple. Her talent is exceptional, and I have always regarded her as my successor, teaching her everything I know. Although I haven't formally taught her about the teleportation formation, I've already let her learn some of the relevant content. If she could master it and rebuild the other half of the teleportation formation, she would be able to leave the Divine Dragon Island." Chu Ning let out a long sigh after hearing Nansu Huai's words. Although this matter was still full of uncertainty, it was still better than having no way out. With Yu's intelligence and Rong Xiao's help, perhaps they could really succeed. Shangguan Jing was thinking about something else. This teleportation formation has been fine all this time. Why is half of it suddenly destroyed? Both Nansu Huai and Chu Ning fell silent for a moment. Needless to say, something must have happened inside. Could it be that Dumpling has been discovered? Or has she encountered some other trouble? Shangguan Jing frowned. If that was the case, they would be in big trouble. Nansu Huai suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the Divine Dragon Island. After a moment, he said in a deep voice, "I don't think there's much movement over at the Divine Dragon Island for the time being. Let's wait and see. If something really happened, the Great Phoenix Dragon would definitely send people out to stop them. No matter what, it was better to observe the situation first before making a decision." After serious consideration, Shangguan Jing and Chu Ning nodded in agreement. Chu Ning sighed softly. "Now, we can only hope that they are safe and successful." The commotion in the Seven Lotus Mountain had also attracted the attention of the guards outside. The two guards turned around at the same time. Their faces were filled with unconcealable surprise and excitement. "They're finally coming out." Only the heavens knew that they had been guarding here day and night until the flowers had withered. It was really boring. However, these two people had special identities. The patriarch had personally ordered them to guard them strictly. They did not dare to relax at all. Their minds were constantly in a tense state, and they were very tired. If those two people could come out now, they would be liberated. However, after waiting for a long time, no one came out of the cave entrance of the Seven Lotus Mountain. Moreover, the trace of fluctuation that had attracted their attention had completely dissipated. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. The two guards looked at each other. What's going on? Could it be that they were hallucinating? That was not possible. Should we go in and take a look? One of the guards asked. The other glanced at him. The patriarch only told us to guard the Seven Lotus Mountain. He didn't say that we can go in. This place was almost considered a forbidden area for the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Even if they were allowed to enter, not many Great Phoenix Dragons would want to go in. That's true. What should we do? I think they can't hold on any longer. That's why they're causing such a commotion. I think they'll have to bow their heads and admit defeat in a day or two. So you mean, we should continue to wait? Let's wait. The defense of the Seven Lotus Mountain is extremely strong. They can't escape. What's there to worry about? That's true. They were very confident in the defense of the Seven Lotus Mountain. They did not believe that the humans could fight against them. Moreover, this was their territory. At this moment, they did not know that Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue, who they thought were being tortured, had already left the Seven Lotus Mountain. Chu Luiyue and the others were swept into the void. After a long period of darkness, they finally stepped on solid ground again. A faint glow surged in from all directions. After staying in the dark cave for so long, Chu Luiyue was still not used to it. She narrowed her eyes and looked around. With one look, she was stunned on the spot. At this moment, they were in a spacious and quaint hall. Black jade stones were neatly laid on the ground. In the middle of the hall, there was a white jade pillar that was as thick as 10 people hugging it. There were cloud patterns carved on it, and a lifelike great phoenix dragon. It was a coiling dragon pillar. A powerful aura emanated from the carved great phoenix dragon. It was frightening. At this moment, it was looking down at them majestically. In an instant, Chu Luiyue understood something. This is the Great Void Temple. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1751. Other than them, there was no one else in the main hall. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. Chu Luiyue held her breath. She really did not expect that they would actually come to this place. Just like the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, the Great Void Temple was their most sacred and solemn place, and they could not easily step into it. Even the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan had to go through many tests if they wanted to enter, let alone them. At this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly had a very strange feeling in her heart. Recently, she seemed to be quite fated with the two ancient divine beasts. In this short period of time, she first went to the divine Phoenix Mountain and even talked to their ancestor in the Phoenix Temple. And now, she was at the divine Dragon Island. She was originally imprisoned, but who knew that in the blink of an eye, she would be at the Great Void Temple? Chu Luiyue looked back and was silent for a moment. Not only did she come with Rong Xiao, but she also brought Dumpling and Ziqin. These two, one was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, and the other used the skeleton of the Great Phoenix Dragon to reconstruct her physical body. What a sin! Chu Luiyue held her forehead and felt a headache coming on. Looking at the tightly shut door, she began to seriously think about how to leave more conveniently. Outside the door is Mao Yang and the rest. Rong Xiao chuckled. Chu Luiyue instantly deflated. Obviously, it was impossible to leave through the door. Windows would not work either. It was obvious that the outside of the Great Void Temple must be full of guards. Unless they went back the way they came, they would really be trapped here. Ayu, look, there's something in the pillar. Dumpling suddenly pulled Chu Luiyue's sleeve and said. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked. There were indeed 4 purple light spots in the coiling dragon pillar. That should be the Great Phoenix Dragon that entered here to find the inheritance. Rong Xiao explained. He was quite familiar with the Thousand Summit, so he could make a rough guess. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. So you're saying there's actually another world within this coiling dragon pillar? Do you see the scales on it? Zichen suddenly said. Each scale contains a succession. Those that are still flickering are the ones that haven't been taken away yet. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. Previously, she had heard from Rong Xiu and Zichen that the inheritance of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe was passed down from generation to generation. The person who obtained the inheritance would return it to the Great Void Temple after death. The Great Void Phoenix Dragons had entered the coiling dragon pillar to search for the inheritance. At this moment, the eyes of the dragon carved on the white jade pillar suddenly flashed with a ray of light. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately became alert. However, she quickly realized that the pair of eyes weren't looking at her. They were looking at Zichen. Zichen's body had fused with that person's remnant blood. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, she suddenly felt a strong force wrap around her. Their figures instantly disappeared from where they were. A moment later, a few more spots of light appeared on the coiling dragon pillar. They floated lightly and shone brightly. Outside the Great Void Temple, everyone was still waiting. Ever since the previous youth obtained a decent inheritance, everyone felt more at ease. Waiting didn't seem so unbearable anymore. Mao Yang sat on a chair. The Great Void Temple in front of him was still calm. He thought for a moment, then asked an elder beside him, "How's the situation at 7 Lotus Peak?" Thinking about it, quite a long time had passed. Logically speaking, the two of them should have figured it out by now. However, there was still no news until now. That elder hurriedly said, "Elder, everything is as usual." In fact, the person in charge of guarding would report once a day. Under such circumstances, Mao Yang still took the initiative to ask. It was clear how important this matter was to him. Of course, this was the first time humans had barged into Divine Dragon Island. Not only Mao Yang, but the entire tribe was paying close attention to this matter. Everyone was waiting for an outcome. Of course, in their hearts, there was only one outcome. Rong Xiu and Shang Guanyu had conceded defeat. None of them had thought of any other possibilities, including Mao Yang. Hearing this reply, his brows quickly furrowed. Something's not right. They could endure a day or two in 7 Lotus Peak, but after such a long time, they still refused to yield. What a stubborn bunch. Mao Yang's gaze turned cold. Then we'll continue to wait. They would wait until they figured it out themselves. On the other side, Chu Luiyue and the others entered the coiling dragon pillar. Chu Luiyue felt that the scene in front of him kept changing. It was almost impossible to see clearly. Finally, their bodies felt heavy and their feet touched the ground. In front of them was a lush forest. The sound of flowing water could be heard not far away. Chu Luiyue looked over. There seemed to be a lake in the depths of the forest. A faint white mist shrouded the lake, bringing with it a sense of tranquility and serenity. However, alarm bells rang in Chu Luiyue's heart. Almost instinctively, her entire body tensed up and she was on full alert. Rong Xiu held her hand, stepped forward, and shielded her behind him. Dumpling also grabbed her sleeve tightly. Her grape-like eyes widened as she looked straight ahead. Only Zichen's eyes flashed with a trace of suspicion. Someone finally found this place. A hoarse and rough voice came from the lake. It was an extremely calm tone, but Chu Luiyue felt that every word was like a clap of thunder. It shocked her to her core. It's really a human? Digression. Rolling on the ground begging for tickets, la 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 la. Comments: Xiaoxiang coins have been distributed. December peripheral list. Xiaoxiang star comments. Lazy sister Xiaohualuo Yuxian IOQQ star of recommendation votes. Yinyutangla comment star. Listen to the wind and tell me cheeky smile. New Year's 3 days event list. Mo Lua memories of Kiani Yinyutangla Charles Liu Yuyumeme is the cutest Qing Qian's cat. Ambergrease the world's prosperity. The QQ list is posted in the comments section of the bookstore. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1752. Then, Chu Liyue felt as if a pair of eyes were sweeping across her body. That gaze was clear and sharp, and she had the illusion that she had been seen through. 2 humans and a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? There was a hint of shock in that voice. Obviously, it was too strange for Chu Liyue and the others to appear here. After a moment, that voice laughed again. I was wondering which talented junior had found this place, but it turns out, it's a 3-eyed divine eagle that has fused with the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. Chu Liyue's heart tightened. The other party had recognized all of their identities so easily. She was about to speak when Rong Xiu spoke first. We unintentionally barged into this place and disturbed you, senior. Please forgive us. After a short period of silence, the white mist above the lake suddenly gathered. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into the appearance of a middle-aged man. Come forward. His voice was filled with inviolable majesty. Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other. Zichen had already walked forward. Rong Xiu nodded slightly. The 2 of them followed closely behind. Dumpling grabbed the corner of Chu Liyue's clothes and followed behind. There was no sun here, but the sky was blue and very bright. The forest was lush and verdant, and there were piles of fallen leaves. When one stepped on them, they would make creaking sounds. A gentle breeze blew over, bringing with it a faint fragrance of plants and trees. Everything looked no different from an ordinary forest. They quickly passed through the forest and arrived at the lake. This was not a very big lake, but the water was still and deep, and there was a faint phosphorescence on the surface of the lake. If one did not look at the illusory figure hanging above the lake, this was really quiet and leisurely. It was a good place to rest. It was a pity that Chu Liyue could not relax at this point. She knew very well that the person in front of her was a member of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. The closer they got, the clearer they could see. This man looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was dressed in a long robe, had an ordinary face, and a long beard. At first glance, it seemed very ordinary, nothing special. However, the piercingly cold aura around him clearly indicated that this man was definitely not a simple person. Chu Liyue even felt that this person was not inferior to Mao Yang. Of course you didn't enter this place by accident. The man smiled. The Divine Dragon Island has never allowed humans to enter. It is definitely not a coincidence that you are here. Chu Liyue felt a little strange. When the Great Phoenix Dragon and the others saw her and Rong Xiu barge into Divine Dragon Island, they were filled with righteous indignation. However, the man in front of her, who was clearly also a Great Phoenix Dragon, did not seem to care about this matter. After all, other than the 2 of them, there was also Dumpling. How could he tolerate this? There's no need to doubt it. I don't have any intention of welcoming you all. It's just that this legendary 3-eyed eagle and I are fated to meet. For its sake, I won't pursue the matter. Several pairs of eyes looked at Zichen. The man sighed and smiled helplessly. At first, I thought it was a smart junior who had come. Who knew? However, that doesn't matter. The bloodline power of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan flows in your body. You can be considered half a member of our clan. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched. This is really casual. As an ancient divine beast, the Great Phoenix Dragon valued its bloodline the most. In their eyes, Zichen was just an anomaly, an existence that tarnished their bloodline. However, why did the person in front of her not seem to think so? Of course, this matter shouldn't be settled like this, but since you have fused with my blood, I will naturally treat you as one of my own. This sentence was instantly like a handful of water poured into a pot of oil, instantly causing sparks to splatter everywhere. Chu Liyue raised her eyes in shock and looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. Stormy waves had already set off in her heart. Zichen had fused with his blood. Then his identity was on the verge of being revealed. You are the one who was locked in the 7 Lotus Mountain? Hearing the words, 7 Lotus Mountain, a trace of haze flashed across the man's face. That's right. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed slightly, and he immediately cupped his hands and bowed. So it's Senior Mao Zhen. Sorry for the disrespect. Mao Zhen looked at him in surprise. You know my name? Rong Xiu's lips curled into a smile. Senior Mao Jin is a genius of the great Phoenix Dragon clan that appears once in 10,000 years. Of course, I have heard of your name. Chu Liwei silently gave His Highness the successor a thumbs up in her heart. This sentence was really good at praising. As expected, Mao Jin's expression improved a lot, but soon, her eyes dimmed again, and she laughed self-deprecatingly. The glory of the past has long dissipated. Now I am just a ghost. I have been hiding here for 1,000 years without seeing the light of day. What's the difference between that and death? Chu Liwei held her breath. Mao Jin. He was actually still alive. Rumor had it that the legendary figure who had killed 7 people in one night due to chi deviation and was finally executed by the Great Phoenix Dragon was actually hiding in the coiling dragon pillar of the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang and the others would never have thought that he would be hiding here. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and smiled. You are still alive, and the inheritance of the Great Phoenix Dragon ancestor is still with you. Your identity is naturally different. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Liwei felt a biting cold murderous intent suddenly attacking. Her heart trembled. However, Rong Xiu was calm and composed, so she did not move. Just as the sharp aura was about to cut their bodies, it finally stopped. Mao Jin looked coldly at Rong Xiu. Junior, how dare you? How dare he say such words in front of him? There were no more than 3 people in the world who knew about the inheritance that he had. This kid was so bold. Rong Xiu's expression did not change, and he said indifferently, since we came here with Zichen, it's not difficult to guess this. What's the point of pretending in front of you? That would only make Mao Jin feel that they were hypocritical and unreliable. Therefore, he might as well be frank with them. Mao Jin stared at Rong Xiu for a long time, and the coldness on her face gradually faded. You have guts. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1753. That's right, I did leave a clue in the cave of the 7 Lotus Peak, hoping that someone of the younger generation would find this place. But after such a long time, there hasn't been any progress. I didn't have much hope at first, but I didn't expect. Mao Jin looked at Zichen with a heavy gaze. He really did not expect that a 3-eyed godly eagle would appear. Chu Liwei pondered for a moment. Senior Mao Jin, ever since you left the 7 Lotus Peak, almost no one from the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe has gone there. It was a coincidence that we were imprisoned there. After that, she briefly recounted what had happened. Of course, she only said that they came from the Godslayer Mound. She didn't mention what had happened in the Godslayer Mound. Mao Jin sneered when he heard this. Mao Yang hates me to the core. Of course, he wouldn't allow anyone else to go to the 7 Lotus Peak. That's why he waited here for more than 1,000 years. What happened to you back then? Did it have something to do with clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Liwei couldn't help but ask. Mao Jin snorted. Since you've already found this place, you must have guessed it. There's no need for me to hide it from you. He took a deep breath as if to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. That's right. Back then I was framed by him and ended up like this. He was the one who killed the 7 people and framed me for it. He was also the one who trapped me at the 7 Lotus Peak and tried to steal the power of my bloodline. Unfortunately, he was one step behind and I managed to escape. Even though he had paid a terrible price for it. But in the end he still survived. Chu Liwei and Rong Xiu looked at each other. Although they had already guessed it, it was still shocking to hear the person involved admit it. This was definitely the greatest secret of the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Then, he didn't know that you were still alive? This was something that Chu Liwei was very curious about. Since Mao Yang was willing to put in so much effort to deal with Mao Jin, he must have wanted to kill all of them. All these years, could it be that he really didn't have any doubts at all? Mao Jin suddenly laughed out loud as if she had heard a joke. His voice was low and coarse, and his laughter was like thunder that struck heavily on one's eardrums, causing one's mind to tremble. Ha! Aren't you overestimating that Mao Yang and underestimating me, Mao Jin? Back then, if I hadn't been at the critical juncture of my breakthrough, How could that despicable person have been my match? His words did not conceal his pride and boldness. That confidence was based on absolute strength. Compared to Mao Yang, who was like a smiling tiger, Chu Luiwei admired the person in front of him more. Laughing and cursing, unbridled and flamboyant, magnanimous. Even after being harmed to such an extent, she still had such an imposing manner. It was hard to imagine what kind of giant Mao Zhen would be if those things didn't happen in the past. What a pity! Seeing her expression, Mao Yang raised his eyebrows and continued. After the ancestor died, his body transformed into this world. The inheritances of the clan were all hidden here. Every Thousand Peaks summit, the younger generation would enter this place to find their own inheritances. This is the most sacred place in the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Even if Mao Yang became the clan leader, he couldn't spy on this place at all. Because of this, I've been here for 1,000 years, but Mao Yang still didn't notice. Rong Xiu suddenly asked. Senior Mao Zhen, the Great Phoenix Dragon clan only has one chance to enter this place in their lifetime, right? You, Mao Zhen laughed. I have the ancestors' inheritance, so I can naturally enter and leave this place at will. Mao Yang thought that I had died and my soul was destroyed, so he couldn't find the ancestors' inheritance. Who would have thought that I was here? So that was it. What kind of expression would Mao Yang have when he found out about this? I'm afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep up the peaceful and hypocritical smile on his face, right? Zichen suddenly said. Then why did you lead me here? Mao Zhen's expression gradually changed. He stared at Zichen. Naturally, to find a suitable descendant for the ancestors' inheritance. The forest was silent. The air seemed to have frozen. After a while, Chu Luiwei came back to his senses and realized the true meaning of Mao Zhen's words. He wanted Zichen to obtain the inheritance of the Great Phoenix Dragon ancestor? Was this a joke? He was a three-eyed eagle. Zichen seemed to have expected him to say this. After a short silence, he said calmly, Senior Mao Zhen, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. I'm the Eagle Lord of the Three-Eyed Eagle clan. There's no reason for me to inherit the inheritance of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. If someone else was here and heard Zichen's words, they would probably scold him for being stupid. The inheritance of the ancient divine beast ancestor. How precious it was. Many demonic beasts in the world yearned for it. Now that it was in front of him, he rejected it. But Zichen really didn't want it. Although he had used the Great Phoenix Dragon's wing bone to reconstruct his body and fused with its bloodline power, he had always remembered his identity. He didn't belong to the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Not in the past, not in the present, and not in the future. Mao Zhen didn't seem to expect Zichen to answer like this. He frowned subconsciously. Are you sure? Only one person in the world could get such an opportunity. Mao Yang hated him. In order to snatch the inheritance of the ancestor, he did everything he could, but he still got nothing. But this three-eyed eagle said it didn't want it? Zichen nodded. I can return your power. Originally, it had only swallowed the blood bead because it felt that something was calling it, not because it wanted to obtain anything. Mao Zhen's face was a little cold. When he saw that it was the legendary three-eyed eagle that had arrived, his heart was filled with disappointment. But he quickly chose to accept this fact and was prepared to give the inheritance to it. But now it didn't want it? It really didn't know what was good for it. Zichen's answer was so unexpected that Mao Zhen took a while to digest it completely. He snorted and shouted in a deep voice, I don't have a body now. I don't have a physical body now. What's the use of this inheritance? Waves gradually rose on the surface of the lake, and the surrounding leaves rustled. The world seemed to be restless because of Mao Zhen's anger. However, Zichen was unmoved. His eyes were indifferent. There's one thing that you might not know. Not only am I the Eagle Lord of the Three-Eyed Eagle clan, but I'm also her contracted divine beast. Senior Mao Zhen, do you really not mind? Mao Zhen was shocked and looked at Chu Luiwei. To me. I'm also a used contracted divine beast. Dumpling waved its hand proudly and tried to make its presence known. Mao Zhen's eyes widened. What did you say? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1754. At this moment, Mao Zhen was in a mess. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Although the three-eyed eagle clan's bloodline was not comparable to the two ancient divine beasts, it was still considered quite noble. The eagle master in front of him was actually willing to form a contract with a human? And the little girl next to it. That was a real crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She was actually willing to give up this face? This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that not only did these two divine beasts form contracts with humans, but they also formed contracts with the same person. Didn't he just stay here for a little longer? Why did the outside world become like this? Besides, 1,000 years was nothing compared to the tens of thousands of years that the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the three-eyed eagle had existed, right? How could... Mao Zhen was in a daze. He looked at Dumpling and Zichen for a while, and his fingers were trembling slightly. You? Dumpling's eyes were bright as she flaunted in a crisp voice. I've been with Ayu for longer than Zichen. Zichen looked back and glanced at her. Dumpling made a face, and her chubby little face was full of pride. Zichen's eyes moved slightly, and he calmly retracted his gaze. Mao Zhen pointed at Dumpling and almost couldn't catch his breath. You this? What's there to flaunt about? You're the incomparably noble ancient divine beast, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Do your clansmen know that you're so happy here? Even if the relationship between the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan was very subtle, and they habitually disliked each other, Mao Zhen couldn't help but feel heartache for the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan at this moment. How could there be such a weirdo? Not only did she form a contract with a human, but she also served the same master as the three-eyed eagle. Most importantly, she was so happy. Mao Zhen didn't understand. He really didn't understand. When he saw Dumpling previously, he had doubts in his heart. Firstly, he felt that it was quite strange for her to be able to take human form at such a young age. Secondly, she had been tightly tugging on the corner of that human woman's clothes, looking very intimate. It was just that he had been thinking about how to deal with the ancestral inheritance, so he didn't have time to think about it. Who knew this would happen? Chu Luiwei gently rubbed Dumpling's head and smiled at Mao Zhen. Senior Mao Zhen, I'm sorry, but Dumpling is still young and innocent. Don't take her words to heart. Mao Zhen's mouth twitched. Children's words carry no harm. He had lived for so many years and still never knew that this term could actually be used on the crimson gold celestial phoenix. Mao Zhen took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and held her forehead in pain. Even though he didn't have a physical body, he still felt a headache coming on. What kind of people were they waiting for? Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the forest in the distance. It seemed like someone was heading this way. Mao Zhen's expression turned serious as she glanced in that direction. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu exchanged glances. The person who came should be one of the 4 people who participated in the Thousand Peaks Summit and were still here. However, after a while, the footsteps gradually faded away. It seemed that that person had left. Soon, the footsteps completely disappeared. It seemed that the person had already left. Chu Luiwei subconsciously looked at Mao Zhen. If that person had come here just now, perhaps he could have obtained their ancestors' inheritance from Mao Zhen. After all, compared to an outsider like Zichen, their own juniors were much more suitable candidates. However, Mao Zhen's expression was calm, as if he was already used to it. Actually, over the years, the Thousand Peaks Summit has been held many times, and many good juniors have come every time. A few of them, like the one just now, have found their way here. Mao Zhen suddenly spoke in a much calmer tone. However, none of them have walked through the forest and really come here. Chu Luiwei saw a trace of desolation on his face. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, it was understandable. After all, Mao Zhen was a great phoenix dragon. If possible, he would have wanted to leave this inheritance to an outstanding descendant. As he said, he no longer had a physical body, so there was no point in leaving this inheritance with him. If not for the fact that he really had no other choice, Why would he choose Zichen? After experiencing too many disappointments, his hot-bloodedness would eventually cool down. In the battle back then, my physical body was damaged and my strength was exhausted. Although I managed to preserve my life here, I'm attached to this lake and can't leave. In addition, things like opportunities are the most unpredictable and can't be forced. Those children have no fate with me or my ancestors' inheritance. Mao Zhen had already thought about this. Although it was inevitable that he felt regretful, life was not as good as he thought. Even he was the same. He looked at Zichen, and there seemed to be waves in his eyes. These descendants of the clan came here one after another, but they didn't notice my presence. You're not one of us, and you have nothing to do with the great Phoenix Dragon clan, but you still came here. Perhaps this was really the will of the heavens. Mao Zhen suddenly paused halfway through. In fact, there was no point in saying these words. Zichen was unwilling to accept this inheritance, and he had already formed a contract with Chu Luwe. These 2 points were enough to make Mao Zhen give up his initial idea. A forcibly picked melon was not sweet. His only regret was that after today, he still didn't know how long he would have to wait to find a suitable successor. Rong Xiu suddenly said, "Senior Mao Zhen, are you really willing to be trapped here forever?" Mao Zhen was stunned. Of course he was not willing. He had not avenged Mao Yang. He had not taken back what he had lost. But now he had almost nothing, and it was not easy to find a successor, but it was not suitable. What else could he do? He looked at Rong Xiu in shock. "What do you mean?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Nothing. To be honest, clan leader Mao Yang was very rude to you, and me before and made things difficult for us. At the Thousand Summit, he said that if you, and I did not erase our memories of coming here, we would be imprisoned on Divine Dragon Island forever. You are the successor of the great Phoenix Dragon ancestor. Whether it is talent or other things, you are better than Mao Yang. As long as the truth is clarified, the position of clan leader will definitely change. At that time, you will be able to take back what belongs to you, and we will be able to leave Divine Dragon Island openly. Why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes. You want to form an alliance with me? Rong Xiu smiled frankly. If we can be on good terms with you, it will be our honor. Mao Zhen closed his eyes. Countless scenes of the past surged out from the depths of his mind. After a long time, he said in a deep voice, I don't have a physical body. If I leave here, my soul will be destroyed. Rong Xiu asked, what if we can help you reconstruct your physical body? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1755. Outside the Great Void Temple, the crowd was still waiting. More than 20 days had passed, and there was still one person inside who hadn't come out. Mao Yang sat on his chair with a faint smile on his face. The atmosphere in the square was also very lively. This was because the 3 people who came out not long ago had also obtained very good inheritances. Including the one who came out first, for the 5 people who stayed behind had already obtained very good results. Of course, everyone was relieved. As long as the last person did not make any mistakes and successfully obtained the inheritance, the Thousand Peak Gathering would end smoothly. Although it was not as good as the previous Thousand Peaks Gathering, it was much better than the situation that everyone was worried about. Most of the people in the square were relaxed and happy. They were chatting in groups of 3 to 5. It's been so long, and Mao Su still hasn't come out. He must have obtained a top inheritance. I think so too. In the previous Thousand Peaks Gathering, the last person to come out was basically the most outstanding. This time, Mao Su is no exception. In comparison, Mao Shang, who was the first to obtain the inheritance, is not that outstanding. Suddenly, someone snorted in a strange tone. That's not necessarily true. The crowd was silent for a moment. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance and an unhappy expression. Whether or not one can obtain a good inheritance in the Great Void Temple does affect one's future to a large extent. But that is not absolute. Some people are destined to become strong. Even if they don't perform well once, they will definitely become strong in the future. There are also people who may be in the limelight for a while, but the final outcome is uncertain. Many people secretly exchanged glances. They were all from the same clan, so of course, they were familiar with each other. This man was Mao Shang's biological father. He had been very happy and proud when Mao Shang obtained the inheritance. Hearing these words now, of course, he felt very irritated. Don't forget that our clan leader was not the last to come out, but now, he snorted and did not continue speaking. But the meaning of his words was clear to everyone. Some people's expressions changed slightly, and they subconsciously looked at Mao Yang. Actually, there was nothing wrong with what he said, but the point was, back then, clan leader Mao Yang had participated in the same Thousand Peaks gathering as that person, and they had also entered the Great Void Temple together. Most importantly, that person was the last to come out of the Thousand Peaks gathering. Mao Zhen. This name had become a taboo in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. Everyone subconsciously ignored this name, as if that person had never existed. Even some matters related to him were extremely sensitive and would not be brought up. Now that the patriarch heard this, seemingly sensing that the atmosphere was a little strange, the person who spoke was suddenly startled. Immediately, he looked at Mao Yang with some uneasiness. Mao Yang looked over and smiled faintly. Well said. No one knows who will emerge victorious until the very end. The one who had the last laugh was the true powerhouse. Everyone nodded in agreement. No one was more qualified than Mao Yang to say this. Back then, Mao Zhen was extremely talented and she was the undisputed number one among the younger generation of the Great Phoenix Dragon race. At that time, all of his peers were enveloped by his halo. Even Mao Yang was the same. But who would have thought that so many things would happen later on? This small ripple quickly calmed down, and everyone quickly moved on to other topics. Mao Yang leaned back in his chair and retracted his gaze, his eyelids drooping slightly. Mao Zhen, even though that person had been dead for thousands of years, he could not help but be filled with disgust and jealousy when he thought of this name again. For many years, he had lived in Mao Zhen's shadow. When it came to geniuses, successors, and the future, the first person the entire race would mention was definitely Mao Zhen. But he, Mao Yang, was not even remembered by name. He had lived such a life for too long, and he had had enough. Fortunately, in the end, Mao Zhen died and the position of patriarch became his. Everyone gradually forgot about that person and regarded him as the highest, competing to chase after him. Everything went according to his plan, except for one thing. Until now, he had not found the ancestors' inheritance. He had always been brooding about this. In fact, the inheritance he had obtained back then was not bad, but it was a pity that compared to Mao Zhen's inheritance, it was worlds apart. After all, in the entire Great Phoenix Dragon race, only Mao Zhen alone had obtained the ancestors' inheritance in 10,000 years. Of course, Mao Yang was very jealous. In order to obtain this, he had used almost all means. Unfortunately, Mao Yang collected his thoughts, raised his eyes, and looked at the Great Void Temple in front of him. Perhaps, after the Thousand Summit ended, he should personally make a trip to Seven Lotus Mountain. The Great Phoenix Dragon is an ancient divine beast. Once its physical body is damaged, it cannot be recovered. Even the Great Phoenix Dragon race can't solve this problem. You're just a human. Where did you get the courage to say that you can help me reconstruct my physical body? After Rong Xiu finished his sentence, the entire place fell silent. Mao Zhen was silent for a while, then opened his mouth to refute. He obviously did not believe that Rong Xiu had the strength to do so. Actually, Rong Xiu had expected all of Rong Xiu's reactions. He took a step forward, his expression calm and indifferent. The Great Phoenix Dragon race can't do it, but it doesn't mean that I can't. At this moment, only one thought flashed through Mao Zhen's mind. Arrogant. Instead, he laughed and said, "Oh? Then tell me, what ability and confidence do you have to make me believe you?" Rong Xiu raised his hand. A cluster of golden flames gushed out from his palm. The surrounding temperature instantly rose by a lot. Mao Zhen's expression froze as he stared at the flames. You probably don't know, but the first one to condense the residual blood you left in the cave on Seven Lotus Mountain was not Zichen, but me. Of course, Zichen could also do this, but he was one step ahead. Hearing this, Mao Zhen's expression finally changed. Rong Xiu continued. Also, when you and I came, we accidentally stepped on the jade disc used for testing at the Thousand Summit. But you don't have to worry, I have completely repaired it. Speaking of this, the corners of his lips curled into a smile. What I said just now is all true. I wonder if this is enough to convince you? Of course, Mao Zhen did not doubt the truth of Rong Xiu's words. Those who could do these two things were not ordinary people. Moreover, the truth would be known with a simple investigation. There was really no need to lie. Then, did he really have the ability? Mao Zhen was silent for a long time before he said, "Even if I believe you, what do you plan to do? You have to know that in this world, there is no fiend beast skeleton that can replace the great phoenix dragon and help it reconstruct its physical body." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1756. Zichen might be able to use the wings of the great phoenix dragon to rebuild his body and even increase his own strength. But the great phoenix dragon was different. The great phoenix dragon was an ancient divine beast with the noblest bloodline power in the world. If he were to borrow the skeletons of other magical beasts, the skeletons would probably shatter before he could do anything. The only one who could compete with it was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, which had a completely different bloodline. It was even more impossible. It was also because of this that Mao Zhen did not have much hope in this matter. Rong Xiu said, "You forgot one thing. Zichen's body only fused with 2 wings. The rest of the skeleton is still in Yu's hands." Mao Zhen was shocked and looked at Chu Luiyue. "You actually have a complete set of the great phoenix dragon skeleton?" Chu Luiyue coughed. Although she won this fair and square back then, Mao Zhen was still a great phoenix dragon. It felt a little strange to say this in front of him. But in the end, she still forced herself to tell Mao Zhen what happened back then. To Chu Luiyue's surprise, Mao Zhen didn't fly into a rage after hearing this. Instead, she sized Chu Luiyue up in shock. "No wonder the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the three-eyed eagle contracted with you. It seems that you are really capable." Chu Luiyue did not know whether to laugh or cry. She did not expect that Mao Zhen's focus would be on this after she said so much. You're not angry?" Mao Zhen waved her hand. "What's there to be angry about? If you want to be angry, you should be angry at Mao Yao. Anyone who was reasonable would know that it was Mao Yao's fault that this matter had blown up to this point. If it weren't for his carelessness, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have been his match back then, much less win him. It was only because he was too proud and arrogant that he was tricked. No matter what, he was already so old and an elder of the clan. How could he be so brainless?" Mao Zhen's attitude made Chu Luiyue secretly relieved. In any case, Mao Zhen was much more reasonable and easier to communicate with than Mao Yao and Mao Yang. "You want me to use that skeleton?" Upon hearing this, Mao Zhen had already guessed Rong Xiu's plan. Rong Xiu nodded. Although 2 wing bones are missing, the entire skeleton is still there. Although the bloodline power in it has almost been emptied, you still have a portion of bloodline power left in the mountain walls of Seven Lotus Peak. It just so happens that you can use it. In this way, the major problems were basically solved. Of course, the level of this skeleton is definitely not comparable to your original body. After reconstructing your physical body, I'm afraid that your strength will be greatly reduced. Rong Xiu rationally and objectively analyzed the pros and cons of this matter and clearly explained it to Mao Zhen. Generally speaking, there were pros and cons. However, this was already enough to shock Mao Zhen. He said that he had never thought of reconstructing his physical body, but how could he really not have thought of it at all? Even he himself didn't know how he had endured the long years he had been trapped in here. Loneliness, emptiness. He wanted to leave this place. He wanted to take revenge on Mao Yang. He wanted to take back everything that belonged to him. How proud he was in the past, how strong was his desire to go out. However, he knew better than anyone how slim this hope was. Thus, gradually his heart turned cold, and he suppressed all these thoughts in the depths of his heart. Many times, he felt that he was just a lonely soul, a lamp that had run out of oil at some point in time. Once he died, everything would be over. But, in the end, he was still unwilling. Therefore, at this moment, when he heard Rong Xiu's words, he could not help but feel a storm in his heart. Endless joy surged up, almost drowning him. Even if his level was lower and his strength was weakened, so what? As long as he could reconstruct his physical body, he could completely leave this place. Everything that he once wanted, he would get it. What could be better than this? Mao Zhen took a deep breath, then said word by word, "If you can really help me reconstruct my physical body, then in the future, if you need anything as long as you ask, I, Mao Zhen, will do my best." Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curved into a perfect smile. He did as he said. Chu Luiwei took out the skeleton. The bloodline power inside had almost been completely extracted, so at this time, even the bones were a little dim. Zichen stepped forward and flapped his wings. Whoosh, a fist-sized ball of blood appeared in front of him. Rong Xiu stood in front of the skeleton and raised his hand gently. A golden flame flew out and gently enveloped the ball of blood. Under the control of the flame, the ball of blood flew in front of him, which was also right in front of the skeleton's dragon head. Then Rong Xiu held his breath and focused his mind, then pointed his finger. Bang! With a loud explosion, the ball of blood instantly split open and transformed into countless sparks that flew toward the skeleton. The sparks burned and soon enveloped the entire skeleton. At the same time, the blood gradually merged with the skeleton. As time passed, the bloodline power contained in the blood also began to merge with the skeleton. The originally dim skeleton began to emit a lustrous light again. A faint pressure spread out from it. Chu Luiwei was secretly shocked by Rong Xiu's strength when he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head to look at Zichen, only to see spots of starlight flickering on its wings. More importantly, the aura on its body began to rise at an astonishing speed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1757. Chu Luiwei was stunned. What was going on? Zichen seemed to be surprised as well. A hint of bewilderment flashed across the depths of his usually deep and indifferent eyes. Mao Zhen glanced over and was stunned at first. Then she laughed. I almost forgot about this. Your body has fused with the two wing bones of this skeleton. Although they have been separated, there is still a certain connection between them. Therefore, when the power of the skeleton begins to increase, the aura of your wing bones will also increase. Chu Luiwei blinked. She seemed to understand. In that case, if the power contained in the skeleton continues to increase, then Zichen's strength will also increase? Mao Zhen nodded. Theoretically speaking, that is indeed the case. However, the wing bones no longer belong to this skeleton, so the increase should be limited. Chu Luiwei sucked in a cold breath. She had guessed correctly. If that was really the case, then Zichen could be said to have picked up an enormous bargain. So what if the increase was limited? But in the end, it still rose. Moreover, this skeleton would belong to Mao Zhen in the future. He was a great phoenix dragon. Moreover, he was a phoenix with top-notch talent and strength. Being able to benefit from his glory was something that many people could not even dream of. Now, Zichen had encountered it. How could this not make her excited? Chu Luiwei looked at Zichen and saw a trace of emotion in his eyes. Of course, Zichen also knew that this was a rich and amazing surprise for him. Previously, he had rejected Mao Zhen's proposal because he had his own principles. However, even he had to admit that it was indeed a great loss for him. Although he did not regret his decision, there were always regrets. He never expected that in the end, because of the wing bones, he would be connected to Mao Zhen again. According to Mao Zhen, he could not only maintain his identity and bloodline, but also have a shortcut to become stronger. As long as Mao Zhen became stronger, his side would be affected, and his own strength would increase as well. Was there anything better than this in the world? Mao Zhen sighed. That's why I said we were fated to meet. There was probably no other such thing in the world. Even if you don't want an opportunity bestowed by the heavens, in the end, it will still fall into your hands through various means. Chu Luiyue was so shocked that he was speechless for a long time. Suddenly, Dumpling tugged at her sleeve. Chu Luiyue lowered his head to look at her. What's wrong, Dumpling? Dumpling bit her hand and looked at Zichen, then at Chu Luiyue. Is what you said just now true? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh and gently pinch her chubby little face. Since Senior Mao Zhen said it himself, it's naturally true. Moreover, Zichen was her contracted magical beast, so she was the most sensitive to the changes in him. This was a foregone conclusion. Dumpling couldn't help but frown with a worried look. She stammered for a long time before saying, Then won't he be more powerful than me in the future? She scrunched up her little face and looked really worried. Chu Luiyue almost couldn't help laughing out loud. So you were thinking about this problem for a long time just now? Dumpling pouted. In the past, she couldn't defeat Zichen. It was only when she became a crimson gold celestial phoenix that she finally won. Whether it was in terms of bloodline or strength, she was superior to Zichen. But now, Zichen's body had merged with the power of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline, and he had joined forces with Mao Zhen. In the future, with Mao Zhen's support, Zichen's strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Then, wouldn't she have no advantage at all? Chu Luiyue looked at her angry face and couldn't help laughing. He almost forgot that Dumpling and Zichen didn't have a good relationship. Apart from the critical moments when they were fighting the enemy together, the two of them basically didn't communicate much. Of course, it was usually Dumpling who was nagging about fighting, and Zichen who ignored her. It was really annoyed by Tuanzi's noise that it took action without hesitation. But it didn't happen often. Now, Dumpling and Zichen were almost evenly matched. If they really fought, it was hard to say who would win and who would lose. Actually, this is a very simple problem. If Zichen becomes stronger, you can also become stronger, right? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Anyway, you're so talented. It should be very easy for you to do this, right? When Dumpling heard this, she felt that it made sense. That's right. If Zichen had become more powerful, then she only needed to become more powerful. No matter what, she had to be the one that you liked the most. Thus, I can definitely win. Hearing this, Zichen glanced over. Sensing its gaze, Dumpling clenched her small fists and raised her small face, looking as if she was ready to fight at any time. Zichen's eyes moved slightly. Then, without saying anything, it turned its head and closed its eyes. Its aura rose again. Dumpling was so angry that her teeth itched. Become stronger? Who didn't know how to? When she got out of here, she would definitely find Zichen and have a good fight. Time passed silently. The flames on the skeleton gradually subsided. The place where the flames disappeared had become as clear and moist as jade. Vaguely, a transparent liquid could be seen flowing slowly inside. That was the power of Mao Zhen's bloodline that had been contained in the blood bead. When the last cluster of golden flames disappeared, Rong Xiu looked up. Senior Mao Zhen, please. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1758. Mao Zhen took a deep breath and took a step forward. His illusory body formed by the white mist left the lake and walked to the top of the skeleton lying quietly by the lake. Without any hesitation, he entered the skeleton. The white mist spread and soon enveloped the skeleton. Rong Xiu took action at the same time. "Hupa!" he shouted. Chu Luiyue immediately understood and took out many herbs from her Qian Kun ring. Boom! She threw out a reddish-gold flame and quickly put the herbs into it. In a short while, she had thrown in hundreds of herbs. If an ordinary person were to look at it like this, they would probably be dazzled and find it difficult to distinguish. However, Chu Luiyue's movements were smooth and straightforward. After a while, the herbs were refined one by one. A rich and slightly bitter medicinal aroma spread out from it. Helping Mao Jin to reconstruct his body was an extremely long process. In this process, many herbs had to be added in at different times. To ensure that the process was foolproof, Rong Xiu was in charge of the refining of the skeleton and left the matter of the herbs to Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu had already told her the herbs she needed. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue had all of them, so it was much more convenient. Purple beard vine, Mingjue, Wuyo fruit. When it was almost time, Rong Xiu gestured to Chu Luiyue to put in the herbs. Chu Luiyue waved her hand, and the 3 herbs that had already been refined in the fire quickly and lightly fell into the golden fire. Spirit severing herb. Blackhead herb. Heavenly pangolin. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. They had always been in sync with each other, so their cooperation was perfect. Without Rong Xiu's detailed explanation, Chu Luiyue knew the different herbs and the steps to be refined. She could always put in the herbs at the most suitable time. Rong Xiu, on the other hand, had been staring at the skeleton in front of him since the beginning. He did not even raise his head. He knew that no one could do it better than her. Although the whole process was complicated and consumed a lot of energy and spirit, the 2 of them worked together and shared a lot of the burden. It was precisely because of this that things progressed more smoothly than expected. The aura of the skeleton continued to grow stronger. At the same time, the light on Zichen's wings shone even brighter. It closed its eyes. For some reason, every part of its body began to ache. At first, it wasn't too obvious, but as time passed, the pain became more and more obvious. Zichen knew very well that the pain wasn't because of any danger, nor was it a sign of trouble. It had a conjecture in its mind, but it felt that it was too absurd. Thus, it just stood there, allowing the pain in its body to gradually increase until its body began to tremble slightly. Dumpling soon saw this scene. She had been thinking about how to prevent Zichen from overtaking her. Most of her attention was on it, so she quickly noticed that something was wrong with Zichen. She was taken aback and hurriedly ran over. "What's wrong with you?" Although she had always regarded Zichen as a rival and wanted to defeat it, she couldn't help but worry when she saw it like this. Zichen opened its eyes. "I'm fine." Dumpling widened her eyes and looked it up and down. "It doesn't look fine at all." Although Zichen's aura was still growing, it looked like it was in pain. "I'm really fine." Seeing that Dumpling was still standing in front of it, Zichen repeated itself. This time, it emphasized its tone. After all, Zichen had lived for thousands of years longer than Dumpling. It knew very well what to emphasize at this moment to make Dumpling calm down. Sure enough, Dumpling shrank its neck when it heard this. Then I'll stay here and watch you." Dumpling turned her head and glanced at Chu Luiyue. Yu was at a critical juncture and couldn't be distracted. If something happened to Zichen, it would definitely affect her. Therefore, for Yu's sake, she had to make sure that Zichen was fine. Zichen glanced at her. She had always liked to go against it. Today's situation was rare. Dumpling felt a little strange being stared at. She immediately puffed out her chest and raised her head. "What are you looking at?" "I'm still waiting for you to be my little brother." Zichen closed its eyes again. Some people really shouldn't have any illusions. The pain in its body was still increasing. But this time, Zichen's body didn't tremble anymore. It swallowed all the pain and torment it had to endure. On the surface, it seemed to be much better than before. Seeing this scene, Dumpling was relieved and began to wait patiently at the side. Bang! The door opened and a figure flew out. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of everyone. The people who had been waiting in the square for a long time were all excited because of this. The last one has finally come out. It's going to be a month soon. To be able to stay in there for so long, he must have obtained a top inheritance, right? I guess so. The first place of the Thousand Peaks Summit. How enviable. Everyone was discussing animatedly, but they obviously had great hopes for the last young man to come out. Mao Yang stood up and took a few steps forward. Hearing the voice, Mao Su immediately cupped his fists and bowed respectfully to Mao Yang. "Greetings, Patriarch." Mao Yang smiled and asked, No need to be so polite. You're the last one to come out of this Thousand Peaks summit. You did well. Hearing this, Mao Su straightened up with an undisguised high-spirited look on his face. Thank you for your praise, Patriarch. Seeing Zhang Xian's reaction, the crowd knew that their conjecture was correct. He must have obtained a very good inheritance. Mao Yang raised his leg and walked in front of Mao Su. Standing here, he could clearly feel that Mao Su's aura had indeed improved greatly. He nodded in satisfaction and patted Mao Su's shoulder. You're very good. He did not ask Mao Su which ancestor's inheritance he had obtained. This was the rule of the Thousand Peaks Summit. Everyone would be able to make a rough guess based on the changes in their auras, and from there, determine their ranking. That was already enough. Unless they were willing to take the initiative to say, others could not ask. Therefore, although everyone was curious as to what kind of inheritance Mao Su had obtained, no one tactfully asked. Mao Yang praised him a few more times before saying, since everyone has come out, then the Thousand Peaks Summit is considered to have ended successfully. Everyone cheered in unison. Mao Yang smiled and looked at the elders at the side. I'll have to trouble you to close the Great Void Temple with me. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1759. A few elders followed Mao Yang and walked forward. Mao Yang stood in front of the door. He held his breath and raised his arms. The power around him began to surge. A dazzling stream of light flew out from his fingertips. The other elders also attacked together. Soon, numerous streams of light gathered. They formed a strange pattern in midair. It was the totem of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Seal! Mao Yang shouted and pushed the totem out. The huge and bright totem began to fly slowly toward the door. Soon, the totem landed on the door. Buzz! A solemn and sacred buzzing sound came from the Great Void Temple. Everyone in the square bowed their heads in respect. However, at this moment, Mao Yang suddenly realized that something was wrong. The totem did not merge with the door. He frowned and secretly increased his power. However, the totem remained suspended an inch in front of the door and refused to move forward. It was as if there was an invisible barrier blocking the totem outside the door. Mao Yang felt uneasy. Such a situation had never happened before. Soon, the other elders also noticed this strange scene and frowned. What's going on? The door of the Great Void Temple can't be closed? In the past, we've worked together to close the door. This has never happened before. What's going on this time? Could it be someone hasn't come out yet? The words of a white-haired elder attracted everyone's attention and made Mao Yang's heart skip a beat. He turned his head to look at the elder. Elder Fushan, what do you mean by this? Elder Fushan was an elder in the tribe and his seniority was much higher than Mao Yang's. He was a highly respected elder in the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. There's only one possibility for the Great Void Temple's door to refuse to close. There's still someone inside. There had been a similar situation in the past. The door wouldn't close no matter how hard they tried. Later, when they investigated, they found out that they had missed a person inside. It wasn't until a few days later when that person walked out that everything was completed smoothly. Mao Fushan stroked his beard. In my opinion, why don't we check in this direction? Mao Yang heaved a sigh of relief and turned to give instructions. Check the people who came out earlier again. The people below quickly agreed. However, some elders were still frowning. Because they clearly remembered that everyone had already come out, and Mao Su was indeed the last one. Logically speaking, there should be no one left in the Great Void Temple. Not long after, those who had entered the Great Void Temple were all gathered and counted by the two elders. However, after checking, they found that the number of people was indeed correct. Clan head, everyone who has entered the Great Void Temple is already here at the Thousand Peaks Summit. No one was left out. The elder in charge of counting the number of people braced himself and said. Everyone's expression changed. Even Mao Yang's heart sank. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at the Great Void Temple again. There was someone else inside, but he didn't know about it. By the lake. The forest was shady, the water rippled, and everything was tranquil. Chu Luiwei raised his wrist and sent out the last medicinal ingredient. A handful of crimson-red sand lightly fell into the burning golden flame beside him. Boom! The flame burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, one could already see that the bones were gradually growing muscles and flesh. Although Chu Luiwei had previously helped Zichen reconstruct his physical body, he was still shocked when he saw Rong Xiao make a move. At that time, Zichen had only borrowed 2 wing bones of the great void phoenix dragon, and she had almost exhausted all her strength. Now, what Rong Xiao wanted to reconstruct was the real great void phoenix dragon. Rong Xiao's expression was calm. The golden flame was reflected in his eyes, and the fire was burning brightly. The effects of all the medicinal ingredients had gradually seeped into the skeleton. The rich and slightly bitter medicinal fragrance was mixed with a faint smell of blood. After an unknown period of time, a purple-gold phosphorescent light flashed through the flame. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. That was the scales of the great void phoenix dragon. Had he finally reached the final stage? Almost at the same time, Chu Luiwei heard a scream behind him. Screech! She was shocked and immediately looked back. However, she was shocked to see that a purple-gold light had torn apart Zichen's wings and broken out of his body. Then, it enveloped his entire body. Zichen! Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. She could feel that Zichen was in great pain at this moment. However, she could not stop him. Dumpling was also shocked by this scene. Her eyes widened in a daze. What happened just now? Zichen's wings. She subconsciously looked at Chu Luiwei. "You? He's fine." Chu Luiwei pulled Dumpling over, patted her head, and comforted her softly. "He'll be fine in a while." Hearing Lin Mingya's firm tone, Tuanzi's beating heart finally settled down. When she saw that scene just now, it really gave her a fright. Chu Luiwei touched her face and smiled. "Dumpling, I didn't expect you to care so much about Zichen." Only then did Tuanzi remember her position and immediately said, "Of course. If something happened to him, wouldn't you be very sad? Besides, I'm still waiting to be his big sister." Chu Luiwei's heart was filled with warmth. Dumpling was lively and pure. Although she liked to put on a brave front, she was always very kind to her people. Usually, she liked to cause trouble for Zichen. However, when it mattered, she still cared about Zichen. However, it would be a little difficult for her to be Zichen's big sister. Chu Luiwei's eyes turned slightly and looked at Zichen again, who was enveloped by the purple gold light. Although the process was painful, as long as he could get through this, Zichen, boom. A loud sound actually came from the sky. An extremely dangerous aura was rapidly approaching. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat and she looked up. However, he heard a deep and fierce voice coming from afar. "Who dares to trespass into the Temple of the Void? Come out." Chu Luiwei frowned. Maoyang. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1760. Mao Yang's figure did not appear. Chu Luiwei remembered clearly that Mao Zhen had said that the great Phoenix Dragon tribe usually only had one chance to enter this place in their lifetime. Obviously, Mao Yang could not enter. But even so, Mao Yang should be waiting outside the Great Void Temple with his people. He wanted to force them out. Chu Luiwei turned around to take a look. Everything had reached the final stage. It was the most crucial moment. Rong Xiao could not be distracted. They had to continue to stay here until Mao Zhen's body was officially completed. Boom! Another sound was heard. It was so loud that it numbed everyone. It was as if someone was holding a giant hammer and hammering it from the outside. "Do you really think that you can hide here forever? Come out." Mao Yang's voice was no longer as gentle as usual. Instead, it was filled with ferocity and madness. Chu Luiwei looked at the sky and sneered. Someone had quietly entered the Great Void Temple and even the Coiling Dragon Pillar. This was no different from slapping Mao Yang, the tribe leader, hard in the face. It was expected that he would be so flustered and exasperated. Of course, they would go out, but not now. Chu Luiwei raised his hand. Countless silver-red stars flew out like a river of stars and spread out. Soon, the few people within the radius, including the lake, were enveloped in Chu Luiwei's god territory. The commotion outside was instantly isolated. Chu Luiwei began to wait calmly. The Great Void Temple's door was locked. There was dead silence in the main hall. A few people stood in front of the coiling dragon pillar. At the front was Mao Yang, whose face was extremely ugly. Standing behind him in a row were the elders of the clan. Other than a few elders who stayed outside to calm the crowd, the rest of the elders who participated in the Thousand Summit had all arrived. It was a matter of great importance. They had to come. Everyone fell into a deathly silence as they looked at the few specks of light floating on the coiling dragon pillar. The air seemed to have frozen. Mao Yang clenched his fists. He was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. It turned out that not only did someone sneak in, there was more than one person. This was simply tearing his face and dignity to shreds and ruthlessly trampling on the ground. How are you guys guarding the Great Void Temple? How can you not know when someone came in? He turned around and yelled at the elders. The elders looked at each other in dismay as cold sweat broke out all over their bodies. Mao Yang rarely got angry. Even when Mao Yao made such a big mistake and caused the ancestors' bones to be unable to be returned to the clan, he didn't do anything to Mao Yao. This time, it was obvious that he had used his true energy. In the silence, Miao Fushan spoke up. Patriarch, we haven't found out how this happened yet. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to convict him at this time. Mao Yang closed his eyes and tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart. Elder Fushan, I know what you mean. However, the Great Void Temple is the most sacred and important place in our tribe. Now that something like this has happened, it is precisely because it happened in the Great Void Temple that the clan leader has to remain calm. Miao Fushan advised patiently. The Great Void Temple has always been guarded very strictly. After the Millennium Summit began, everyone was even more vigilant and didn't dare to relax. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, all of us were in the square and no one noticed this. It's clear that the other party came prepared and moved very stealthily, deceiving all of us. Mao Yang was also there. He didn't notice anything either. If not for the fact that they couldn't close the door in the end, who knew when they would have found out about this? Therefore, this couldn't be blamed on the elders. Mao Yang took a deep breath. Miao Fushan's words were reasonable. Moreover, he was very senior, so Mao Yang naturally had to be more polite. If he ordered Miao Fushan around like this, he would really be crazy. You're right. I was impulsive. Miao Fushan shook his head. Patriarch is also worried about the clan. Mao Yang looked at the coiling dragon pillar again and frowned. Who the hell are these people? Where did they come from? After realizing that something was wrong, they quickly came in and checked almost the entire Great Void Temple. There was nothing strange. Everything was exactly the same as when they first arrived. Patriarch, could it be that someone tore through space and came here? Miao Fushan pondered for a moment and asked. Mao Yang nodded thoughtfully. This was the most likely possibility. Moreover, I have a feeling that the people who came in aren't from the clan. Miao Fushan pointed at the stars on the coiling dragon pillar. Look, this color is really wrong. When the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clansmen entered the coiling dragon pillar, they all appeared the same color. However, these people had different colors and were completely different from them. Mao Yang's eyelids twitched violently. If they weren't from the clan, then they were outsiders. But Divine Dragon Island was heavily guarded and didn't allow anyone to enter easily. How no? Mao Yang suddenly thought of something and his expression changed abruptly. Rong Xiao and Shang Guanyu were also on Divine Dragon Island. He immediately said, Quick, go and check 7 Lotus Peak. See if those two are still there. The elders looked at each other in surprise, and then they quickly understood what was going on. Did the patriarch mean that the two of them were suspicious? Yes. I'll go now. One of the elders nodded and turned to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, Mao Yang followed with a gloomy expression. Forget it. I'll go personally. He really didn't feel at ease letting others go to 7 Lotus Peak. Elder Fushan, I'll leave this place to you for now. Mao Fushan nodded. Given the current situation, it might really be those 2 people. It would be good for the patriarch to go personally. Mao Yang strode away and disappeared quickly. 7 Lotus Peak. It was quiet and everything was as usual. One of the guards craned his neck and looked in the direction of the Temple of the Void. He asked curiously, didn't the last person come out just now? Why is there no movement now? Logically speaking, everyone should have left after the 1000 Summit ended. However, it had been a while, but it was still quiet. The other guards said, maybe there are other things that haven't been settled? After all, the 1000 Summit is only held once in so many years. Before he finished speaking, the 2 of them saw a figure flying toward them from afar. The aura was awe-inspiring and imposing. It was actually, greetings, Patriarch. Seeing the face of the person who came, the 2 guards were shocked and hurriedly bowed. Mao Yang's face seemed to be covered with a layer of ice. Where are Rong Xiu and Sheng Guanyu? The 2 of them were stunned. They're still inside. Mao Yang knew that it was meaningless to continue asking. He waved his sleeves, opened the barrier, and flashed in. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.